A new guest at a care home becomes the target of another resident, a downright malicious man who wanders the halls at night, abusing helpless victims. This one has some serious star power in Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow, so let's take a look at the role of Jenny Penn. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tim.
Whoa, slow down, whippersnapper.
This is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a horror movie, and we've been doing it for 60 years apparently, based on that soundbite. So welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking about the role of Jenny Penn, which we'll start spoiler free on, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers, and if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, hit the like button. If you're enjoying it as a podcast, give us 5 stars on whatever podcast format you got it from. But you can also support us over at Patreon and get bonus content, but I'll tell you more all about that at the end of the episode. But welcome to the show. We're here today to talk about a movie set in a sort of care home for the elderly and the sick. Which actually, have we done Bubba Hotep? Because it's the only other.
I'm pretty sure we did.
Did we? I don't remember if we did. Maybe we did. I'll have to search my list of episodes later.
And we've obviously both seen it, but
of course, yes, of course. Because that was the thing I was thinking about. Is like, is this going to measure up to Bubba Hotep? Because when I think of old men in an old folks home, like dealing with an evil thing, I think of Bubba Hotep, of course. That's the benchmark for the entire old folks horror subgenre.
Absolutely.
Yes, but yes. So we'll get into the premise of this role of Jenny Penn. It is listed technically as a 2024 movie, but I mean this will be eligible for any 2025 discussions. It didn't really come out until this year via Shudder and all that. So Geoffrey Rush is in this as well as John Lithgow. So it's got some big names. And it's actually, despite those names, a New Zealand film. And Lithgow, at the very least, does do an accent, and it seemed all right to my ears. I mean, admittedly, I don't think I'm an expert on New Zealand accents to, be a judge, but it sounded fine to me.
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah, well. So Geoffrey Rush plays a character who has a stroke. He is a judge, and he has a stroke while he's in court. And he ends up at this old folks care home for care after, when he's recovering and his body's, going through a lot of stuff. And the premise of the movie simply is that John Lithgow plays a character who walks around with a puppet. And I kind of use that term loosely. It's really more of a doll that he's just kind of cut the bottom off of so he can stick his hand up it. But he likes to torment the other patients. He is the villain of this movie, and that is the premise of this. It's very much an example of like your protagonist and indeed other characters in the film are very vulnerable because they're not very mobile and no one's believing them that something's going on. And John Lithgow is an evil bastard who is just tormenting them ad nauseum. But hey, like I said, we'll start spoiler free, so I'll leave it there for now, and we'll just we'll get into things. So, I mean, before I ask if you liked it, Tim, how much buzz did you hear for this? Was this something that was on your radar when it came out in like March, April time, or is it just kind of whatever?
I had heard. It's one of those ones where I feel like I'd heard, a decent number of people talking about it, like, oh, hey, this movie's coming out, or oh, this looks cool. But I didn't really feel like I've heard much people actually talk about like watching it and then how they felt afterwards. I feel it was one of those ones that's just kind of like, oh, this looks cool, can't wait to watch it, and then don't really hear much after it. I know the big one is like Stephen King said he thought it was like one of the like best horror movies he's seen in a long time, which I love Stephen King, but he sometimes like doesn't always have like the best recommendations. and also I feel like he's a little what do you call it, biased because, I think maybe this hits a little harder if you're elderly or... Because
he's that age. He's around the age of the characters in this, so it's hitting them a bit close to home.
Yeah, and he's had, like, he had, like, that bad accident where he got, like, hit by a van and, he had, like, time spent in a hospital and I'm sure in, like, rehab and stuff. So there's probably things that he can relate to in it, which, not to say that, you can't find things to relate to or things to like about it if you're not in that situation, but it probably, hits harder if you are. So yeah, that was the big one. But other than that, I don't think I feel like I've heard too many people talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard people talk about it a little bit when it came out, but not a huge ton. But it was certainly enough that between the names involved in the movie and what little I did hear, it was like, okay, this seems like it's one that's worth us doing. And this came out when we were still deep in 2024 catch up, so we kind of just let it slip at the time. But we're at the 2025 movies right now, and we have a little bit of a break between theatre releases, so this was sort of next on the list to go back and check out. So without further ado, Tim, what did you think of The Rule of Jenny Penn?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say that I love it, but I didn't hate it. I would say it's probably okay to maybe veering.
I was going to say, I feel like there were some phrases in between I love it and I hate it that you might land on in the middle. It's a shame there's nothing in between those two.
I know. I mean, it's I talked about this before, but I always feel like with the internet, everything is so extreme that it's like, well, if you didn't love the movie, then you hated it. Like, that's what it seems like a lot of the time. But I feel like it was just kind of okay with maybe veering on good in some aspects. I think the big positive of the movie obviously is like the strength of the actors, like you said, like Lithgow and Geoffrey Rush. They're obviously like very charismatic and very engaging to watch. I do appreciate trying to do something a little different. Like, obviously we don't see a lot of movies in nursing homes and stuff, although there is one that came out this year. I don't know if you heard about it. I feel like it was in the theater for like a week or something, but there's like a one about Pete Davidson like being sent to work at a nursing home. It's by the guy that did
I did not see
The Purge, I believe.
I know. I'm unaware of this, blissfully, one might say.
Yeah. It looks horrible, but yeah, I'm sure we'll probably have to do it at some point. But no, it's always interesting to see, different kind of protagonist, different kind of setting. I think a big, well, I don't want to say issue necessarily, but maybe something that kind of let me down a little bit is I feel like I wanted Lithgow to go maybe a little bit harder or to seem like a bit more sinister. Like, don't get me wrong, he is a piece of shit, like through and through. Like, he's awful, but a lot of the times it felt more like, he was less of like a scary horror movie character and more of just like a bully. You know what I mean? Which, not to say that, if you were in the situation that the characters were in, that, he wouldn't be scary or whatever. But, a lot of the stuff that he's doing just felt more like, the way a bully like taunts someone or makes fun of someone or something, which I don't know. I think I was just maybe expecting something like a bit more scary or evil or whatever. But I guess that's kind of like maybe a small complaint because, again, he's still Lithgow. He's still very entertaining to watch, and, they find interesting things to do. It is like very frustrating that it feels like a lot of these problems are just due to bad management at this home. Like, there's so many times where I was just like, oh, for God's sake, like, just like put locks on the doors or just like have better security or like cameras or something. Like, it's one of those movies where it's kind of frustrating that that their system really isn't there to help them, which I'm sure, that is probably like realistic, like I'm sure, these places that aren't, don't have a lot of money or whatever, like, or people like understaffed or overworked that, that they can't do everything. But, that was definitely kind of frustrating to watch. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like, I don't have like a ton like super negative stuff to say, but yeah, also I wouldn't say like I was blown away by it by any stretch.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards more good than okay, but I would say that I don't know if it leaves me with like the desire to watch it again per se. I do think there is some strong like once we get into this the sort of stuff where John Lithgow is just appearing like in the rooms at night and starts like tormenting them, I'm like, this is actually quite effective because they feel so helpless. And a big part of the, because you were talking about how like, oh, it's a little frustrating, like, wouldn't this place have more cameras? It probably would, like, why aren't the staff doing more? I mean, the staff for the most part just don't believe that anything's happening, which is kind of a big part of it, because they don't have any reason to not just think that, old Geoffrey Rush is just having some like imagination problems, because it seems plausible that he would. So yeah, I mean, you have to give it a little bit of leeway to sort of accept that the villain gets as much free reign as he does. But he is quite intimidating, and if nothing else, I think it's quite effective in at feeling the helplessness of the people in the situation and that they can't really do anything, which is kind of like how an old person in an old folks home presumably might feel, is that it's like, oh, they don't have any control anymore, therefore they feel at the mercy of others. And it just so happens that there's one other old person who's an evil bastard who enjoys making everyone's lives a living hell. It's almost like if, I mean, obviously the backstory in the movie doesn't like line up with this at all, but it's almost like if the Joker got old and he couldn't just be the Joker anymore, but he could go around and torment the other people at the old folks' home. So he's just going around and doing that. It's got a little bit of that out of it. So, overall, I had a pretty solid time. It kept my attention for the most part. There's maybe a couple of spots here or there where I zoned out a little, but I think the actual sequences and the performances from the three leads, because we've mentioned Geoffrey Rush, we've mentioned John Lithgow, but I think we have to also shout out the third lead of the movie, which is the roommate character. His name's Tony, played by George Henare. He is like, maybe not on par in terms of screen time with the other two, but he's so important to the plot, and he's such a big presence in the movie, and he does a really good job with the role. I feel like everyone's going to talk about the other two, because the other two are the big stars, the other two are the ones who are credited as producers, and all the rest of it. But Henare is actually like a really, really good third leading person in this movie who helps anchor a lot of the stuff that's going on. And and there's a character arc, there's some tense sequences. It was definitely a different type of horror movie, and I'll give it that as well, as that it felt kind of unique. I didn't just feel like I was watching another movie of like, a kind that I've seen already. It didn't just feel like another ghost story or another this or that. It felt somewhere between, I don't like, a Bubba Hotep and a Misery, I guess. So somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. But no, so I mean, we don't get too much of that. And in general, I mean, we don't get too many movies that are doing that kind of thing, so it felt relatively fresh, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll always take something that's trying to be a bit different or showcasing maybe like different kind of people or whatever, versus just having the same kind of generic Hollywood horror movie that we get all the time. I think kind of the big thing here, which I think they do a really good job of, is like, I mean, as intimidating or whatever that John Lithgow is, I think the real horror of it is just like, how your body fails you, because I mean, ordinarily, like, Geoffrey Rush's character, like, he should be able to stand up for himself and like fight back and stuff, but when he's in his condition and stuff, like, it makes even doing the littlest thing. That's
kind of the point, though, right? Because like, like so often with a movie like this, and horror movies and sci-fi movies in general are very, very I say guilty as if it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But typically what they do is they'll take something that's very real and add this extra thing on top to like exaggerate it, to like really get the point across. So the idea here is that the horror is really the fact that his body's like breaking down on him, and he's not really accepting that, and it's making him feel vulnerable. But you give him like a villain who's going to take advantage of that to really hit home all the bad feelings that would come with that. Because it's one thing, okay, you can't like, walk around the way you normally do. You can't, do your daily routine, do the things you want to. You're stuck in this place you don't really want to be in, but you have to be. All these like more normal elements of it, like, already make people feel, miserable and depressed, and like, there's a lot to take in and process, and not everyone is able to adapt to it. But then you add in this villainous character who's going to actively take advantage of it and use it to do whatever they want. It basically just takes it and like turns it up to 11 so that you really get the feel like all those feelings that he's feeling are stuff that he would be feeling anyway, but they're just turned up because now there's an adversary who's actually exploiting all of it. And I think ultimately that's the point of the movie. Is like it's a story about this guy ultimately having to learn to deal with things in new ways, and like, you know, we'll get into all that as we get into the spoilers, obviously. But yeah. So no, I mean, I think it's pretty strong. It's one of those movies where I think there's great sequences in it. I think there's great performances. I think it's fairly well directed and like handled all the material. And I feel quite positive in the end on it. But I also, like, as you said as well, I don't feel blown away either. Like, I don't think I'm running streaming going, oh, this is amazing, this is like a must watch. I thought it was solid. And I think it's something that I don't think anyone will regret watching. But I feel like it's probably not going to be one that I return to. And, you know, so it's kind of in this weird area above just okay. And even, like, you know, well into good. But at the same time, it's like kind of just going to live there. And I'm not, you know, there's movies that are worse than this that I'm probably going to be more excited about going back to. And that's just maybe, I don't know, like just a weird thing about, you know, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, I mean, I totally get that. And I mean, it's definitely not like a fun movie where you're like, hey, Saturday night, let's call the boys and watch, you know, like it's not that kind of thing that, you know.
Oh, hold on. How many movies are you going, it's Saturday night, it's time to call the boys?
You know, there's well, I imagine most Critters or Gremlins films would fall into that category.
So movies about little monsters specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that's what the boys are into, you know. I mean, you know, everyone's boys may, you know, vary, so.
Continue with your point.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not like a, you know, super fun movie that you're like, oh yeah, let's get it. Like, you know, it is like a little, it's good, but it's kind of depressing.
Yeah, I mean, the real horror of it is like sitting there wondering, oh god, is this how I'm going to end up? Is this where my life is leading when I get to certain ages, if I make it to those ages in the first place?
Exactly.
Yes, that's the true horror of it. But no, and obviously, you know, we haven't really talked about what the title means. I mean, we'll get into that more in spoilers, but we'll just say that the doll that he always has on his hand is called Jenny Penn, and the title obviously relates to that. But we'll get into that a bit more. I think one of the things the movie does quite well is the opening scene of the movie is like, you know, when he has his stroke and it's, you know, he's in court and he's delivering like a verdict or whatever. I think the filmmaking did a really good job of showing the experience he was having, because I kind of guessed what he had, what was going on as it was happening purely through the way it was being edited and filmed and the way he was getting kind of like lost in his thoughts and confused. Like I was like, oh, I think this is a stroke, and I was right ultimately. You know, once they actually started talking about it in the follow-up scenes, I thought they did a really good job of getting like. I mean, as far as I can tell what that experience might be like. I mean, obviously I don't have first-hand knowledge, and hopefully I never do, but it came across really well. I thought they did a good job with that.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the movie does seem to like respect, you know, the characters. Like it never feels like a cartoonish version of an old folks' home where, you know, people are just like spouting nonsense and like, I don't know, like walking into walls or something. Like it just there was like a realness to it that kind of felt like, oh, like I can see, you know, this happening to people as they get older.
With the exception maybe of the one old woman that was in the background in a few scenes with her head pressed against the glass, and that was like her whole bit. Like that's just every time you noticed her, that's what she was doing. Like, yeah, all right.
I also thought it was kind of interesting that they really don't try to make the judge character like super likable. Like you're rooting for him because he's the main character and he's like fighting against the John Lithgow's evil character, but he does seem like kind of an asshole, especially like like he seems to have a very like strong sense of justice, which I guess is a good thing to have, but he also seems very like unwavering and like no time for nonsense or like wanting to spend like time getting to know anyone or being really like that nice or cordial with anyone.
Well, yeah, I mean that's all very intentional because that's playing into this idea that he thinks he's only going to be here for a short time, he's going to get better, and he doesn't belong with these people. There's this like refusal to accept, and yeah, he's a curmudgeon. He's a miserable old bastard who is kind of short with people, and again, like, and that part of the charm of that though is that you can still sympathize with him to a point, even though he's a kind of a dick. But as the movie goes on, and he does maybe open up to one or two people a bit more, and like a friendship kind of maybe forms, it feels more like heartwarming because he was such a dick to begin with. So it's all very intentional. They do a good job of kind of like, it's almost like he's looking down on some of the other patients that are there. But then if you're actually paying attention, you're noticing that he's making some of the same like statements or complaints that the other patients are, just in a different way, just with different words, but you're still fundamentally like making the same mistake as the other patients. You're still falling into the same pitfalls and traps. So I think there's definitely like a you're meant to be critical of the character because he's got growing to do over the course of the movie. So yeah, it's good stuff. So yeah, I mean, as far as anything else goes, I mean, music's pretty laid back. There's like one or two moments where I did notice it come in with like sort of pulse or something like that, but it's mostly pretty kind of low key and just lets the performances and the dialogue do the work, which is fair enough. But yeah, I mean, the main thing is the performances of the three leads more than anything else. Like they're giving it their all. They're John Lithgow's being super creepy, a little bit unhinged. Geoffrey Rush is really hammering home the curmudgeon, but the vulnerability is there, which is what gives him the layers. And we won't talk about too much about Henare until spoilers, but like he comes across much more likable, but also has some faults as well as the film goes on and his own stuff that he's going through. So, no. I would say it's absolutely worth watching. Like if the premise sounds remotely interesting to you, it's pretty well done, and I don't think you'll be mad that you watched it. But yeah, I'd probably sort of temper the expectations a little bit and just say, I came out of it thinking this was good, but it's kind of in this weird good range where I'm kind of like, it's good, but I'm probably not going to be returning to it, and I'm not going to be saying, oh, this was amazing, whatever. It still may end up on the top 10 of the year. It just kind of depends what else, we have in the year. Like, this could totally make it on there, depending what it's up against. But, yeah, definitely in the lower half of the top 10, though, I would say.
So you wouldn't necessarily be pumped if you heard they're making a Rule of Jenny Penn 2?
I'd be a little confused because it does not seem like a movie that would necessitate a sequel. But are you making a joke, Tim, or are you actually saying you've heard some news?
Oh no, I haven't. But
okay,
I was just curious where you stand.
I mean, that's so weird. It's like saying, "Oh, would you be excited for Schindler's List 2?" Like, well, I'm pretty sure. Like, I mean. No. Dear. It definitely is a one and done, unless they wanted to do weird like spin-offs and prequels and all sorts. But we'll get into the spoilers then, shall we? Unless there's anything else you'd like to add, Tim, before we do.
I'm good.
All right. Well, spoilers for the Rule of Jenny Penn. You have been warned. So yeah, we sort of already said what the opening scene was. He's in court. It is worth mentioning though, he's in court and he's sentencing this man who assaulted a child, right? And he's saying, oh, you like, you talk about how you're remorseful, but you did it like, several times. We have evidence here for like time after time you did this. So, you're getting 16 years, blah, 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 right? He gives it the sentence. And the woman, presumably the mother of the children that has been assaulted, cries out, thank you. And the judge character, Stefan, which is Geoffrey Rush's character, turns and says, oh, don't thank me. You're not innocent in this. You're culpable. This was going on under your nose. And he starts like giving, and it really sets up this idea of like how hard-edged he is. And he's like, he has no time to even consider like the idea that, even if she did know something was going on, if she was scared of the repercussions, maybe she was also scared of him. I don't know if, because they never really get into the details of this case. Like, is this like, was this like her boyfriend or husband that was doing this? Is this, whatever, right? We don't really know what the context of the people involved are. But like, there could have been like circumstances why she was scared to speak up and why it maybe took time to do whatever. So, but he's not entertaining that for a second. He's just like chewing her out for it in front of everyone until, of course, he can't speak anymore. And like we get into the main plot of the movie. But I think the fact that he's not willing to consider why someone has circumstances for not necessarily speaking out immediately leans nicely into the rest of the movie, where he is vulnerable and he's a victim of someone, and his roommate's a victim of someone, and he's like, come on, you should speak up. Why aren't you speaking up? And he gets really mad at him for not backing him up when he tries to like, tell the staff that something's going on. So, it does say, again, it does a good job of setting up the character so that we understand kind of his faults, the things that he needs to sort of maybe grow a little bit on. So I thought it was a solid opening in that way.
No, I agree. Like, it starts off really quickly and tells you like, everything you need to know about the character. Like, oh, okay, he is like this tough, no nonsense guy with this like, kind of strict moral code, but you can see that it's like, oh yeah, almost to a fault where he's not wavering or even like, I guess he's not good with people because clearly this upset, again, who knows what the circumstances are, but clearly this person is also a victim in some way too, and he wouldn't even give her like the little bit of rope to just have that little win. Like, he has to chastise her as well. And then like you mentioned before, it pretty quickly goes into the effects of him starting to have a stroke, and it's it just seems like really well done, and almost scary to a point where it's like that just seems like kind of terrifying when your body can just stop working. And like and how like confusing and scary that must be for him, and obviously like Geoffrey Rush is playing it all really well.
Yeah, I mean, arguably the effect, because I think the very first thing we see is like the first little moment where he's not hearing things properly. So technically he's already starting to have it, even in the very start of the scene. So we technically never meet the character before he has a stroke. We meet him as he's starting to have one, and he's just not quite, hit the full effect of it yet, for a couple of minutes until it does kick in full force. So now I don't know if that's completely realistic. I mean, I don't know if there's a little bit of a warning before the full thing hits, but it works in the context of the scene because it gives you a little bit of time as he's still kind of, he's still forming sentences, he's losing track for a second, but he's still able to say the things that he's trying to say, and then of course he collapses and everyone rushes to him. But like you said, he's not a people person. Like, I mean, one of the first things we get in the old folks home is like his roommate comes up to him during like lunch or breakfast and like tries to just like chat with him and get to know him, and says, hey, my son gave me a book for my birthday or whatever, one of those Tom Clancy books, and he's just trying to like make small talk about a book that he's now reading, and Geoffrey Rush just has to like look down on it. He's like, oh, that's generic mainstream trash. All those books are the same. I read actual literature. I read, the greats, and I quote them, and he does. He quotes Hemingway and he quotes whoever else throughout the movie. So it's like very quickly, this guy's trying to be, this is Henare's character, Tony. He's trying to like be nice to him and like be friends. and he just will not accept it. He's like, oh no, I'm 1 foot out of here. As soon as I'm better, I'm out of this place. I've got no interest in staying. And that's kind of his attitude for a lot of the first chunk of the movie. In fact, one of the things that annoys him up front, because he complains to like the staff about sharing a room. He didn't realize he was going to be sharing a room when he signed up to come to this place. Is Tony's in the other bed, like on like a Skype call or whatever with his grandkids, and this moment felt very true to life to me, because I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but whenever anyone's having like some sort of video call on a phone or a tablet or a laptop, it does sound awful. Like it's very shrill because the speaker quality is always quite bad on those. So it always has this very harsh kind of sound to it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I get, because unless you're the one listening or talking to the person, so you're actually like paying attention to what they're saying, it just sounds like awful noise. And I was like, oh, I actually get it. This is really annoying. I would be annoyed having to sit in the room while this call was happening. But he's like lying in bed, and he's now in a wheelchair. He's confined to all this. And so actually, let me ask a question, Tim. Early on in this film, he goes outside and he ends up smoking with this other old guy who's also in a wheelchair. And then he gets up on his walking stick. He can still kind of walk around a little bit with his stick at the start of the movie. That kind of deteriorates as the movie goes on. But as he walks forward and he's kind of just taking in the scenery or whatever, behind him, this other guy like sets himself on fire by accident.
Right.
You just sort of see it out of focus, him bursting into flames. The implication that he's maybe dropped his lighter or something or whatever. Well,
they set it up nicely because, like, at first he offers, Geoffrey Rush a cigarette, and then after that he takes out like a little flask, which like he offers to Rush as well, and he's like, "Oh no, thank you." And then they have like a quick scene where he like takes a swig, and then I don't know if it's too strong with him or something, but he kind of like spits it up. So it's like, oh, okay, he has like all this whatever alcohol liquor like over him. So then it's like, okay, yeah, if you drop the lighter or cigarette, something bad is going to happen.
But the question I have, Tim, is that did you think this movie was going to be supernatural? Because I thought this was so absurdly dark, this guy setting himself on fire, that I was assuming that the doll was going to be like a curse thing, and like whoever, like Jim Lithgow was cursing other patients, and this guy was like his most recent victim before Geoffrey Rush is going to be his new focus kind of thing. Now that's not what it is. There's no supernatural things in this movie. There's no curses or anything like that. But this moment was so absurdly dark and felt like someone had like done this to him, even though it was just an accident. Technically, it felt like someone had like manipulated fate, Final Destination style, for this obscene, like horrific accident to happen.
I didn't think that, but it is funny because. Yeah, it does stand out.
Yeah,
as,
old
like,
people on fire is so funny, Tim. I agree. It always makes me chuckle.
Just in just to juxtapose it, to the rest of the movie, because even when they have like more, I guess like the scarier bits or whatever, they're not very like extreme or, I don't know if you call someone on fire like gory or whatever, but like it's not like that level of absurd, like you said. So it does kind of stand out as being like this wild scene at the beginning of the movie, but I don't think I necessarily thought that there would be like any supernatural stuff. Like I kind of mentioned it before. Like I thought that Lithgow maybe would be more of a like horror kind of villain, like where. Maybe he seems a bit more twisted or deranged or something, where, again, he's obviously a bad guy, but like a lot of the stuff he's doing, like it's almost like schoolyard bully stuff, where it's like he's kicking him under the table and going like, oh, watch yourself, or, saying like, hey, like, lick Jenny Penn's asshole or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, he ends up doing like some really bad stuff later too, obviously, but I don't know, a lot of this stuff just felt like, oh, this is more like schoolyard bully than, I don't know, like Jigsaw or someone.
I can see the comparison, but like I think you're maybe ignoring a couple of things he does, even early on. Like one of the first things he does when he comes into a room, their room at night, Maybe not the first time. The first time maybe when he comes in and just like it turns out to be Geoffrey Rush's own piss bottle, but he undoes that and pours it all over him, so it looks like he's wet the bed. And Geoffrey Rush is demanding, oh, like this man came into my room and he did this and he did this, and no one believes him. They all just think he pissed himself, because that seems fairly plausible given where they are and what's going on. But the next time he comes in the room, is the thing, but the order of this might be a little bit messed up in my head. But he comes in and he apparently has been tormenting the roommate, Tony, like for a while, right? Because Tony's like completely broken as far as it comes to him. Because, you know, before when the piss thing happened, he wouldn't confirm it. He wouldn't say, you know, he wouldn't back up what Geoffrey Rush was saying. He just said, oh, I don't know. He just woke up and he woke me up because he was acting all hysterical. So immediately it's like, oh, wait, why is he not, like, you know, is this because he pissed them off or whatever? Is it because he's scared of Lithgow? So the first time we ever hear the who rules thing is John Lithgow coming into the room and he holds the dummy or the little puppet right in front of Tony's face and says, who rules? And very kind of scared, Tony says, Jenny Penn. And then Lithgow sort of tilts his hand to expose his wrist underneath the dummy, and he calls that Jenny's asshole and says, go on, lick her asshole, and makes him lick his like wrist effectively. And it's really uncomfortable. It's really kind of, there's nothing that gross about licking a wrist, but it feels gross because it's forced, and it's like, you know, it's in this kind of situation. But also in this scene, and this is where I think it goes beyond the bullying thing that you were getting at, is he grabs Tony's like crotch with Jenny Penn's like little arms and kind of like, I don't know, squeezes, I guess, whilst he kind of, I won't say barks, but he kind of goes rah, 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 right in his face. Like, we kind of crossed into assault here. Like, this is actually,
absolutely,
you know, and this is like one of the first things we see him do in the movie. So there was definitely like a more of an edge to it than just, you know, kicking someone or like, you know, hiding things in the room to make it look like they've been stealing stuff, which is also something that he does a little bit after this. So, but yeah.
No, I just think, I don't know, to me, it's just a little strange because it kind of like goes back and forth, at least to me, between doing stuff that's like, all right, well, that's kind of annoying, but it's not like, you know, he's on the level of like Freddy Krueger or something, you know, where it's like, oh my god, like I'm terrified of this guy. But then yeah, he does do other stuff where it's like, oh, okay, that is extremely messed up.
Well, I think
I don't know.
I think it was filmed in a way where every time he came into the room, it was scary. Like I think that was the differentiator to me, is that during the day when he's just staring and being creepy, or he's kicking under the table, like you said, it's mostly this little petty stuff of like, you know, I can get to you. But to me, like, the fear of it was the idea that he's going to come into the room and you're like confined to the bed. Because that first time he's in the room, the camera just pans over and he's sitting in the corner, and it is quite creepy. This old guy's just sitting there when you didn't know, like, when he came in. You know, Geoffrey Rush either just wakes up or he has one of these little moments where he's kind of zoning out because his mind's been going, and that's something that happens throughout the movie. Like, I know, I don't think the movie was ever trying to make him be a Freddy Krueger, just to go back to that comparison. You know, it was going for more this like petty guy who, I mean, by his own admission later, he never amounted to much, so he gets to just enjoy being a dick now. And he likes to torment people because he never made anything of himself. Like, that's kind of becomes his backstory later on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it's just like an expectation thing. Like, I was maybe thinking there's going to be something a bit more creepy or sinister about him. And again, I'm not saying at all that he's not like dangerous or anything by any means. Like, obviously he is a threat, but I guess maybe it's in maybe a more like realistic way versus again, like an over the top horror villain, which is maybe what I was expecting. Because, you know, like if it was just a normal guy, maybe I wouldn't have that idea, but because, you know, he has this weird doll, you know, to his, you know, attached to his hand, like obviously not attached for real, but because he has like that gimmick, I was expecting maybe there'd be more of like some type of weird horror angle to it, and it's not. It's, you know, played, I guess, fairly straight. Like, this could be a real person. yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just something I was expecting to be like a little different, or waiting for some type of turn where he has like this big, uh, like sinister angle to him. But it's just he's just kind of an asshole, like you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's just an expectation thing, though, and I think maybe why I sound a little bit more positive than you is maybe because I just kind of like as soon as they like showed him do something for the first time, I'm like, okay, this is the parameters we're working on here. This is the type of like scope of what he's going to do. So I was never left thinking, oh, why is he not doing more, or why is he not being quick? Because he does lead people to their death, and it is implied at least at one point that he kills someone in their sleep. There's the old lady who's like convinced that her family's coming to get her just after Christmas. In fact, this is actually a good bit to bring up because this was a big character moment I thought for the main guy, because Geoffrey Rush is sitting there and this old woman sits next to him and she's like, "Oh, I'm just here for a little bit until Christmas. My family's went away on vacation for the holidays. They're going to come and get me afterwards." But she starts to repeat it, right? It's like, oh, she's not actually that all there. She's kind of just repeating this over and over again. And she's like, "Oh, I hope they're getting here soon because they're coming to get me just after Christmas." Do you have any idea how long that'll be? And Geoffrey Rush, deadpan, no time to humor her, just says it's October. And it's basically just like, oh, she's been like maybe this is like how she's coping with being here, is she's like convinced herself that she's just here for a couple of weeks and then her family's coming to get her. But the reason why that stuck out to me is because just a couple of scenes later, he's sitting, and this is the scene where he's complaining about being in a shared room, and he's like basically getting kind of mean with the woman who runs the place, and is like demanding things, and he's pissed off and whatever, and he utters the line, "Look, I'm not going to be here for very long. Once I get better, I'm out of here and I'm gone." And I'm like, you know what? You might not sound quite as delusional as the old lady, but you effectively have the same delusion, is that you're assuming that you're just going to get better and get out of here, and I'm not convinced that's actually how this is going to go for you. And of course the movie sadly goes down this path of proving that he is not going to. And maybe one of the most sinister things that John Lithgow ever does in this movie is the scene where after they've had a couple of interactions, I don't know if this is before or after, because it's not the first night or the second night even where he comes out of the room and tries this, but there's a night where he comes in and he makes Tony do the whole "who rules," he says Jenny Penn, gets him to lick his wrist, and then whatever, but then he looks over at our main character Stefan and says, "Hey Stefan, who rules?" And Stefan just stares at him and is like, "I'm not going to talk to a stupid doll." Like, that's not happening. And it's basically like he starts to torture Tony and tug on his catheter and stuff like that, to like basically try and provoke. And then eventually at the end of the scene, he comes over and sort of says it again, like, who rules? And Geoffrey Rush eventually spits in the doll's face, and then John Lithgow responds by spitting in his face 3 times. So it's really gross, it's really kind of like uneasy and uncomfortable and all the rest of it. And I don't know if it's before this or after this, but there's a scene where like the rivalry's kind of been cemented, where John Lithgow, and it's probably the scene where he's kicking him under the table actually, but he leans in and says, "Hey, you're going to end up with that guy over there." And he points to this guy who's like, in a chair being fed by someone else because he can't do it anymore. And he's like, "Hey, you're just like him. You're going to just keep getting worse until you can't speak anymore, until you can't do anything for yourself anymore." And it's kind of hard hitting because it feels like he's probably right, but he's being like a complete asshole by saying all these things. And it's like playing on the insecurities of this guy who's convinced himself that he's going to get better, he's going to leave. I mean, arguably the saddest scene in the movie, not the most disturbing, because obviously that's all John Lithgow stuff, but the saddest scene in the movie is the montage where he's clearly getting worse because they ask him to draw a clock, and like it looks like he's doing it okay, but then when at the end of the scene when he hands it over, it's not what we were seeing before. We were seeing it from his perspective, and the doctor looks down and like the numbers are just sort of like all trailing off to the page, like past the circle, and it's like, oh no, like he's getting worse, and think that progresses as the movie goes on.
Yeah, I felt like honestly, like one of the scariest scenes, again without Lithgow, but the bathtub scene where, yeah, the nurse is giving him a bath, and she's like, oh, like, I have to leave for a minute to get a towel. And he's like, oh, I'll be fine. And then, like, you just see him starting to slip, and, like, that was, like, pretty harrowing. Like,
was he slipping or was he intentionally going under? Because I thought he was doing it intentionally at that point.
Oh, why?
Because it looked like he was doing it intentionally. I thought he wanted to end it. I thought that was like because that comes up later on as well.
Oh, interesting. I never got that. To me, it seemed more like, his body was just getting to the point where he couldn't even like hold himself up anymore. So he was just like, starting to go under. To me, it seemed like he was kind of struggling to get back up. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was though.
He looked so depressed before. I mean, that's the other thing. And to be fair, this is consistent across both him and Lithgow, because you see some scenes of Lithgow being bathed as well by like nurses, and in both examples, like they both look depressed and miserable. And I think it's kind of interesting to see Lithgow in those moments, because it kind of feels like he also clearly like hates like where he is and what he's become, but he's like finding like this enjoyment in tormenting others. But clearly, when he's going through these parts where he's going through like, the routine and he's being bathed and all the other things, it's almost like he's acting out because it makes him feel powerful, because he feels so weak when he has to be bathed by like some nurses. So he gets to act out and like feel like he's in charge, like he's in control of things by tormenting other people. It kind of hints at like part of his motivation for why he's doing all of it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I actually think some of the more like interesting scenes, because again, I feel like this is stuff we really wouldn't get in other horror movies, but like when you start to see how fragile he is, and again, he's not a like super mega villain who can do no wrong and is invincible and stuff. So like you have the scene where after he leads that lady outside, and when he gets back and then realizes that like they switched like the wrong key cards, and like he frantically has to get back, like just seeing him like freaking out so much, it's like, oh, he's not like this stone cold calm collected guy. And then later when he's doing like the dance and then he starts like what do you call it, like hyperventilating or whatever, like it seems like he's trying to do this creepy intimidating thing, and then halfway through his body's like, oh man, you really overexerted yourself. Then he's like scrambling for his inhaler and stuff. Like I thought those were really interesting scenes, like just showcasing that he isn't this unstoppable force or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, those are both good performances. I think they're both worth talking about some more, because they both have a lot of context around them. The first one, he does that with that old woman, because it's the woman who thinks her family's coming to pick her up, because he basically tricks her by saying, your family's out there, and basically just leads her to the gate and lets her go off into the night until she drowns. But it's worth mentioning that he's got a key card that lets him in everywhere, because he used to work here. So he basically has like an employee key card. And that's what he's so scared about when he gets back and realizes that she took that. And he thought he got it back, but he actually got hers. And he's wondering why he can't get in his room. And that's why he freaks out and goes and gets her. I think the more important thing about that scene, though, is the reason this happens right after Geoffrey Rush has refused to say the Jenny Penn thing. And it kind of feels like he's like, it's almost like he targets this old woman and acts as cruel as this. And this maybe ties back in again to what I was saying about his motivation for treating people the way he does, is because it makes him feel strong and powerful when he otherwise feels like a weak old man. Because it's basically when Geoffrey Rush stands up to him as much as he can and says, no, I'm not going to do it, that motivates him to immediately go and pick on someone else. It's like, oh, I need to go and get my kicks. Like, I'm angry, I'm annoyed, I'm going to go take this out on someone. And he leads this woman to her death. So like, I think, there's some smart little touches in there with how it's written, and like how one thing like affects the next. So he like you say, like when he realizes he doesn't have his key card anymore, because he ain't getting that back or getting another one if he loses it. So he runs out after, and it's almost like kind of comically like dark and funny. The way that he's running and this song starts playing. It's one of the most notable moments where a song comes in, is him running out to this like little swamp area where he tries to get his key card back, and then he starts to have an attack, and he has to get his inhaler out to breathe. Which the other scene you were mentioning, and the reason why that happens is because Geoffrey Rush sneaks into his room when he's getting bathed, and he sneaks in, and he kind of like leaves some dirt out of the plant pot, maybe intentionally, so that John Lithgow knows he's been there. So John Lithgow just storms into the main room, puts on this record, this vinyl, and starts dancing with the puppet, all intimidating and staring at Geoffrey Rush. But halfway through, he starts to, need his inhaler. He starts to have an asthma attack. He starts to struggle. And when he pulls out his inhaler, it doesn't work. It's empty. And we find out, we get a little flashback here, that what Geoffrey Rush was doing in the room when he was there, like, because that was a question we had, is what is he up to? Is he planting something? Is he going to try and make it look like he's been up to something bad and get him in trouble so they'll take him away or whatever? No, it turns out he was just sitting pressing the inhalers over and over again to empty them so that they wouldn't have... hopefully, I mean, yeah, the intention here might have been to kill him. Like, no, we need to get rid of this guy. Because by this point in the movie, like, Tony's scared shitless of him. Geoffrey Rush is feeling more and more vulnerable. I mean, I think by... Has this happened? I don't think this has happened yet. No, that's coming next. But, like... He like, he's put them through so much hell and they feel so vulnerable that they're just trying to get rid of him, or at least Geoffrey Rush is. But of course, just as he keels over and he's maybe about to die, that's when a staff member finally finds him. And this is kind of getting into the joke of like, where's all the staff during all these bigger moments, and like no one's like catching this guy wander the halls at night, because he's always like, John Lithgow is just walking around wherever he wants at night and no one's paying attention to him. Like no one's noticing, no one's like patrolling the halls. It does feel kind of wild that there's not at least a couple of security cameras, because there's a guard. We see a guard at a desk at the front. You don't have cameras? Like, what's going on there?
And I mean, this might be like too nitpicky, because obviously, like, there's no movie, if he changes or whatever. But it did frustrate me that, like, again, this is obviously like the intention of the movie, but like, yeah, just the fact that you feel so helpless with the staff, like, because he makes so many complaints, and they just never believe him, or they just write him off, or like there's even the one time where he's about to make a complaint, like, well, actually he complained about you, and he's just like, wait, like, what the hell? Like all that stuff, like, I don't know, it just I mean, I guess it does an effective job, because they want you to feel frustrated and helpless, like he feels. But man, that like pisses me off so much. I'm like, come on, like you can't take him a bit more seriously, or again, like,
but Tim, keep in mind, keep in mind though, Tim, that's again part of like the getting old part, is like this idea that people don't take you seriously anymore. They don't think you're a threat. True, they don't think you're being honest, or even if you are being honest, they don't care. It's like, oh, the old man's saying crazy things again, just ignore him. Like, I think that's part of what they're going for here, is that no one believes him, so he's truly on his own, and it's part of the vulnerability of it,
Yeah. And then the other thing that's kind of drives me crazy is the roommate not standing up for him too, because like, well, if you guys both like stand together, like, they should listen to you and you'll have more ammo to take them down. But then I think they do a fairly good job later of like explaining why he's hesitant to do that. So yeah, he's got a good little speech he gives about it, because they're lying in bed later in the movie, and he's like, wait, why aren't you like saying something? If if we both said something, they'd have to do something. And so that's the roommate character. Tony used to be a rugby player, right? So he was kind of a celebrity when he was younger, and he basically says, hey, do you remember this TV presenter? And he names someone. Maybe, I don't know if it's a real person or someone made up for the movie, but it's like, hey, remember that TV presenter? And he's like, yeah, sure. It's like, well, do you know they found his body in the river with a giant pink dildo shoved up his ass? And he's like, what? And he basically just explains, oh yeah, like he went to see a dominatrix, which is something that he did, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just, that's what he was into. But, it didn't go well. He died during the session, and the woman got her boyfriend to help dump his body in the water, because they panicked and didn't know what to do. They thought they'd be blamed, or she thought she'd be blamed.
And the point he's making, like all the details aren't actually that important. The point he's making is that this guy was this celebrated presenter for years who was like the uncle to the country, like New Zealand's like, you know, favorite celebrity. But now all anyone thinks of or talks about whenever his name comes up is that he had a big pink dildo up his ass. And that's like, he doesn't want his children or his grandchildren especially to look at him differently as a victim. He doesn't want to like ruin the image of like this person that he thinks he is in their eyes. And I thought that was like a reasonable reason for his like not wanting to like, you know, admit to all this stuff happening, I guess. It's the shame part of it. It's kind of like why some victims of assault don't come forward. Not the only reason, obviously, but it's one of the reasons why they might not, is this idea of shame and they don't want to be looked at as like as a victim.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, you add in the fact that, like you said, he used to be a rugby player, which, you know, is a very like macho thing. So he probably, you know, has like a little bit of, you know, like feeling weird about being more fragile and stuff when he used to be like, you know, kind of like a big, tough, celebrated guy. And then, like you mentioned earlier, you kind of add to the fact that, you know, the judge was like a dick to him earlier. Like, you know, if he had, you know, befriended him from the get-go and they formed a relationship, like, I don't know, maybe he would have been a bit more willing to, you know, work something out with him or at least talk about it earlier. So, but I think you kind of mentioned like he has like a character arc which ends up I think being pretty nice. Like
I think both of them do, honestly. Like both Geoffrey Rush and Tony the roommate. I think they both have good character arcs because Tony earlier on, like, it's revealed that he goes and hides in one of the laundry rooms so that like John Lithgow can't find him. Like they said that, and Geoffrey Rush calls him a coward. He just straight up calls him a coward, and it feels kind of mean and nasty, and it's like, oh, you're just being a dick. Like, you know, maybe offer some solutions, like encourage him or something, but instead he judges him. He literally lives up to his profession, I suppose. So no, I do think that stuff is fairly well handled. So the big thing is that after the attempted death, and there's a little moment that I actually did really like where they're having lunch and John Lithgow's not come in yet, and like Geoffrey Rush and Tony look at each other like, I think he's dead, and they look just so smug and happy, like everything's been solved. But of course, it's not too long after that where Geoffrey Rush has one of his little moments where he's not really like sure how he got there, and he's being pushed in his wheelchair, and he looks up, and it's John Lithgow looking down at him, all, you know, weird and giddy and manic, and pushes him.
That was a good scene.
Yeah, he pushes him really quickly into like one of the sort of the rec rooms and shuts the door behind him. And what's so wild here is he pushes him so hard that he hits the table and he falls off out of the floor. So Geoffrey Rush is on the floor during this scene. There's a blind guy who's been kind of seen in the background a few times, and he's got like a button that tells him the time on his wheelchair. You know, it's like the time is, you know, whatever. Which I remember very vividly actually, because earlier on in the film, after the first night where John Lithgow does something creepy in the room, the next day Geoffrey Rush tries to like fight back by dropping a C-bomb on him during like in front of everyone, and I laughed not because of the C-bomb, but it's just as soon as he said it, the blind guy behind him hit his button and it was like, the time is, and it almost felt like the blind guy was trying to like distract everyone from the tension. It's like, here's the time. Anyway, so that scene gets kind of wild because obviously like Lithgow's like attacks on Tony were a little bit sexual at times. Not necessarily that he wanted to do anything for pleasure in that sense, but just that he was touching his genitals, he was threatening to do things to them, that kind of thing. And in this scene, whilst we've got Geoffrey Rush on the floor, he like gets there's like one old woman in the room, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to get you ready for your bath." And he sits her down and he starts undoing her top. And notably, this old woman, while she's very confused, does start to look kind of scared during the course of this. And it's really, you know, it feels quite dark. It feels sinister. It's like, oh God, what's he going to do? And Geoffrey Rush is able to get to his feet with his walking stick, and he hits John Lithgow with his walking stick across the face, which kind of takes him down. But then the staff come in afterwards, and like they're, you know, it looks bad that Geoffrey Rush is maybe the one who was attacking someone. How it would have looked like he was the one that was behind all of it, I don't know. And it's actually at this point where I felt like every time after this, where Lithgow's still able to wander the halls, I'm like, surely they would tighten security up after they find one of them partially undressed, and like someone's assaulted another one with a walking stick and like,
you put all that stuff together, and then like, you know, the lady that wanders off and dies like probably wasn't that long ago, like. Yeah, it was just like a few days ago or something. And
in between this, there was a montage where John Lithgow went into someone's room and we saw the body of the guy be taken out on a stretcher the next day. So there's at least been one other death as well. Now, what he did he suffocate the guy? Did he just, I don't know, like scare him to death with a heart attack? I have no idea, but...
I think, was that the guy that like you kind of see him just like writhing on the floor and then Lithgow just closes the door?
I think so. No. Oh, maybe that was that guy. Maybe there's two people that have died. I could have sworn he went into a room and we saw him go towards the bed, and then we saw a stretcher the next day. But yeah, maybe it was that guy, because there was also, yeah, you say there's one guy where Lithgow's going just back to his room, and he follows the cat that's been wandering around, and he finds like this patient on the floor, like reaching for the button to get help, and Lithgow just closes the door. It's like, no, you can just stay and die. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
So that's good on as well. So Geoffrey Rush gets much worse after this, and you can sort of see in one side of his face that it's really drooping. He doesn't really seem like he can speak that well anymore. And John Lithgow still comes and like finds him in his bed. He's on his own now. And this is the scene where, you know, he goes on a little bit. He talks about his backstory, and says that he even saw this judge once upon a time. He's like, oh, I saw you in court and you were commanding the room. And he says he was in his 40s, which means 30 years ago, something like that. But this is the scene where, you know, he gets right in his face and once again says, who rules? And Geoffrey Rush, as best he can, says Jenny Penn. And John Lithgow, you know, bends over his wrist, puts it and says, now lick her asshole. And I did love the tear going down the side of Geoffrey Rush's face as he struggles to like stick his tongue out. It's like a really sad, dark scene, because John Lithgow basically said, you will break, I will break you. He's basically, I mean, I've already committed the Joker, but he's Bane, right? Geoffrey Rush is Batman and John Lithgow is Bane, and he's broken him. So this is kind of the big darkest moment before the other characters decide to try and do something at the end of the movie. But I mean, what did you think of this scene?
No, yeah, it was very well done. Again, yeah, Lithgow is just delivering like a really nice little monologue here, and then yeah, it gets sufficiently creepy, and yeah, you can really feel like the struggle with, you know, the judge, and obviously this would be tough for, you know, most people to do, but I'm, you know, I think like there's a lot of people that probably just be like, all right, whatever, I just want this to stop, so I'll get this over with. But again, as we've seen throughout the movie, you know, he has this very strict sense of justice, and he knows this is wrong, and he, you know, believes in like standing up for yourself and everything. So for him to have come this far and know that he has no other option, it's it's a pretty like heartbreaking moment. Like you can feel like how tough this is for him.
Yeah, it feels like it's like he's finally realized that he's stuck here. Like he's not going home. He's not getting better. Like, you know, this is truly the breaking in every front. But the sweet thing that happens after this is Tony the next day at lunch, when Geoffrey Rush is sort of wheeled in for his soup or whatever, and John Lithgow's sitting there. There's a whole bit here where Tony just gets up and starts singing and slapping his legs at John Lithgow, almost as like a like not intimidation, but like a, what's the word I'm looking for, like a challenge, like I'm standing up to you kind of thing. Like, you know, I like, you know, you've been breaking, like it feels like he's finally decided to try and stick up for Geoffrey Rush, and it feels kind of heartwarming that he is. And then of course we find out quite soon that these two do actually form a plan, where this provokes obviously John Lithgow to want to target Tony again. So he goes looking for him and finds him in that laundry room that we sort of set up earlier on. But when he comes in, they're waiting for him, and Geoffrey Rush like trips him, and like jumps on him, even though obviously he's quite weak. Tony grabs his legs and he basically just holds his neck and tries to strangle him and smother him with like the bed sheets that are around until he finally dies. But it takes like a while because they don't have that much strength. But it's kind of like they have to kill this guy or they're just going to be living in fear and torment. So it's an interesting ending. Like that feels like a lot more low key. It really just, in a weird way. Like, obviously John Lithgow's caused the death of at least 2 people throughout this movie, but this is actually a lot more hands-on than he ever was with any of his victims. He's responsible for the death of those other people, for sure, and he's definitely more evil, but it is kind of interesting that to fight him, like, these 2 had to just decide, no, we have to kill him. Like, we have to get rid of him. So they do, and the end of the movie is them burning the doll. They throw it on, like, the barbecue or whatever outside, and the movie ends with Geoffrey Rush like sitting in the room with everyone else as they're, I think they're actually playing games at this point. He's playing like backgammon or something, and he just looks a little bit more content. It looks like he's accepted where he is and he's not miserable anymore. And it kind of feels like John Lithgow's character in a lot of ways really was just this manifestation that represented all of the refusal to like accept where he was. Like, it was this like almost dark entity, not in a literal sense, but it was kind of represented that. And now that he's finally defeated that, he can, accept where he is, who he is now, and find the, whatever joy he can, and the friendships that he can maybe form, at least with Tony, who now they're best of pals because they took down Lithgow together.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do think my first reaction to the ending was kind of like, oh, that's it? Like, that's how they defeat him? Like, again, it's not, like anything super clever where it's like, oh, like we have to use this thing against him. It is just kind of like, yeah, let's just strangle him, basically. Like, we'll trick him, or we'll get him to come into this room and just kind of like jump on him. But
I guess it kind of fits into your bully comparison, and all it literally takes in the end is for them to stand up to him. Obviously it's a more extreme version of that, but like it's also quite grounded in that it's not a chainsaw or something,
Right. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it does end up fitting the movie because, again, it might not like seem like anything that big or daring, but again, because of the limitations they're working with, with like the state that their bodies are in, this is actually, quite harrowing for them. So it's I think it's pretty interesting. And then there's a nice little bit, like you said, with the burning Jenny Penn. Just feels like a nice little way to be like, okay, like we're done with this guy and this evil. But
yeah,
I'm curious, like, if there's ever any type of investigation or something into what happened to this guy. But
I mean, I guess it's, because it's suffocation, maybe it'll just look natural enough that it's like, hey, it's an old folks home. People are dropping like flies here anyway. We're not going to look too hard into it. Like, as cynical as that sounds actually kind of plausible that, well, we're expecting all these people to die here, so
yeah,
let's not question it too much when it happens. Although one getting outside the grounds of the building and drowning is definitely more of a cause for concern. Which, their solution to that, for the record, because we get a solution on camera, which is that they have put a padlock on the gate so that they can't just walk out. That was it. They put in a padlock. Geniuses, the lot of them. All right, Tim, what are you rating The Rule of Jenny Penn out of 10?
I hope this doesn't feel too low, but I think I'm going to go 6.5. I do think there was a lot of good stuff in there. I just think maybe it missed the mark a little bit for me on certain things, but it's certainly not a bad movie. I think we get some really good performances and some interesting ideas. Maybe I might go up slightly higher after maybe thinking about it and absorbing a bit more, and again getting over some ideas and expectations I had about it originally, but for right now, I think I'm going 6.5, which is like, yeah, it was like kind of verging on that okay/good territory for me, but again, it didn't really blow me away or exceed expectations, but by all means, not a bad movie, and I'd say certainly worth checking out.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more positive than you, just because I think that the performances are good. I think the tension is there. I think the characters feel truly vulnerable in a lot of the scenes, and it does make Lithgow feel super threatening and menacing. Even, it's all to scale. It's all like, okay, yeah, it's nothing compared to like a mass murderer, but it's in the context of what they're in, it feels super menacing and intimidating. And I think that works really well. I think the only thing I would say is that it kind of just falls short of being great for me, just because like it's kind of like some movies are more than the sum of their parts and some are less than the sum of their parts. And I think at the end of this movie, it felt a little bit less than the sum of its parts, but there's so many things in here that I would compliment, and there's very little that I actually would critique, other than maybe just a suspension of disbelief that there's no cameras and that the staff don't notice more of what's going on and so on. But other than that, I don't have too much to complain about. So I think for me, it has to be at least hitting the 7. I have to say it's good. I could even stretch to the 7.5 because I do think there's a lot of worthwhile things in there. That said, though, because I don't feel that sort of tinge of like excitement, I'm going to just stick to the 7. But I think it's good. I think it's worth checking out, worth watching. So yeah, there you go. That is the rule of Jenny Penn. And next time on the show, we should, assuming everything goes to plan, next week should be The Conjuring 4. I don't remember what the title is. Just 4.
Last Rites, baby.
Last Rites. Yes, and it's directed by the guy.
The end of the
yes.
Conjuring saga.
Well, it's the end of the two characters, the Warrens. It doesn't mean they won't do any more spin-offs, but I think in the trailer it does say it was their last case, so they are marking it as the final hurrah for them. Probably just because, Formiga and Wilson probably just want to be done and not have to keep coming back. That's it. It's from the director of the third movie, which sucked, and he also did Nun 2 and La Llorona, I think. So I'm expecting an absolute palish shite, if I'm honest. I'm not expecting a good movie. But we probably should do it.
It's a big notable movie, so I mean, I like the characters enough that I'm interested in it, but the director does not have me thrilled.
Not at all. But anyway, that's the plan anyway for next time. If anything changes, there'll be something else slotted in, I'm sure, but that is the idea. So let us know what you thought of the rule of Jenny Penn. If you've seen it in the comments, like, subscribe. But of course, the big thing is to tell you about Patreon and YouTube memberships, because you can get bonus content. We have an even more stream segment most weeks. For this week, when this goes out, there'll be a review of Sweet Revenge, the Friday the 13th short film, the official short film. So we're quite passionate on that, but we often do like top fives and like silly little discussion things, usually related to the movie we're talking about. But yeah, you can get that. Plus, there's a whole back catalogue of bonus episodes, and there'll be another bonus episode. In fact, it may have already happened by now. I'm not really sure when it's coming out, but there'll be a bonus episode soon if there hasn't been. And of course, we are kind of in September now, meaning that we're getting towards October, and Octoberthon will be hitting. Maybe a little bit later because Tim's been moving house, and usually we start recording October episodes in like July, and we haven't started yet. So it'll probably be a later October, but we got stuff planned. We've got a whole franchise we're going to go through. We've been having votes on Patreon for picking certain classic movies, so we've got a number of things planned. So look forward to that. But that is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.